Okay guys, but with all due respect, how are you not prepared for mine at this point? It's a little ridiculous to not have a well thought out plan when entering a tournament. That is one of my most famous tweets or infamous tweets of all time. As far as competitive Yu-Gi-Oh goes, it's left quite a mark on the landscape. And this is before my YouTube days. So while the number of likes and shares aren't crazy high there, it's definitely left quite a bit of a mark on a reputation. And with that, it also got a song that King Scarlet made, which directly takes my tweet into kind of a banger, which if you guys haven't heard, here's a snippet.
Okay guys, with all due respect, how are you not prepared for this yet?
And if you guys haven't heard the full song, go check it out in the link below. But yeah, it became quite a phenomenon in the community, and it's still being talked about to this day. Where the point of this video is going, I had a comment on my my regional thread. I decided to bring one of Triff Gaming's the 60 card Yummy combo deck to a regional just to test it, and I lost very quickly because cards like Artifact Mjolnir and What just wiped me out of the tournament. And then I got hit with my own copy pasta. Okay, with how due respect, how are you not prepared for Mjolnir at this point? Yeah, blah, 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 blah. I've been here before. I've had this coffee pasta thrown in my face so many times. Whether it be shifter or anything I lose to. If I don't win die rolls, like how are you not prepared to win die rolls? The second I make any sort of cathartic, damn I lost sort of a statement, I get a response in some shape and form of this coffee pasta. I want to talk about it because even with regards to the original post, I had many people kind of misconstrue what I was trying to say and kind of look at me like I'm an elitist talking down to players. But this was not meant to dismiss people or to call you stupid or to be like that at all. This was meant as like a genuine thing because it should help players get better. I think that's worth some discussion. So let's talk about the Mystic Mind tweet. Okay, so before I kind of break down the discussion a little bit, if you guys enjoy the discussion videos that I do on the channel, let's make sure to like and subscribe, as well as comment down below any other ideas, because of course there's not always topical things to discuss. I'm always curious what other drama or interesting discussions are happening that maybe I'm not privy to and that I could be interesting to partake in. But in regards to the tweet that I received over the weekend, this was meant to sort of deflect onto me how ridiculous that I sounded, as well as I guess supposed to show my naivety, or maybe it was just a joke. I hope it's just a joke because I'm all for it and I have no problem with it, but it still kind of reminded me of what a lot of people do respond to this type of thing with some sort of seriousness. But they're actually right. How am I not prepared for Mjolnir at this point? It's a little ridiculous to have a well thought out plan when entering a tournament. And well, yeah, I responded kind of exactly that way. That's entirely fair. I wanted to see how the deck would do, and I got my answer. As long as Mjolnir is in the format, it's way too volatile to play. Referring to, of course, Triff's deck, a deck which plays 3 hand traps total between the main and side. If these FTKS combos like Mjolnir exist, that deck is just coin flipping or die rolling in many matchups, like the one matchup that I lost against the K9 Crystron deck. It's not that crazy for me to say, yeah, I should have been more prepared. And that kind of brings me back to the context of the original tweet. This wasn't meant to kind of laud my accomplishments over people either, because at the time that I'd posted this, I just come off of the top 4 at the YCS in Brazil. And it was right before I got second place at another YCS in Niagara. So I was in a bit of a hot streak. This wasn't meant to defeat other people's opinions. The thing is, when you're deck building, you need to look at it through the lens of trying to solve a problem, right? You build your deck based on synergies and combos, but the next step then is to figure out what doesn't work, what's beating you, because obviously you will still lose, and synergies only get you so far. Now, this is something I've actually talked about more in depth in a competitive series on TCGplayer, which I'll link down below as well, which can help you get better at Yu-Gi-Oh! But still, this is something that I talk about called problem-solving deck building. It's something I talk about from time to time on the channel, and I don't talk about it infinitely because I don't want to shove it down your throats, but it is the most pivotal thing for me, and I feel like my success as a deck builder. Because after you focus on your synergies, your combos, and your main strategy, figure out why you're losing. really get down to the nitty gritty. Am I losing to this matchup? Okay, what interaction? What card? What non-engine? What interruption? What type of interruption? What cards are specifically making you lose the game? But then once you have your problem, solve it. Yes, that is easier said than done, and not everything can be solved, nor is there always a way to do this without giving up something else, a concession. Compromises exist in the deck building, and like with effectively everything in life, so I don't have some easy answer at every point for every problem. Regardless, this is the approach to deck building that has led me to what I consider to be many optimized deck lists for YCS events. If your deck has a problem with Droll and Lockbird, try find cards to beat Droll and Lockbird, while at the same time focus on synergies that don't lose to Droll and Lockbird, like maybe playing Fainted cards in your deck, or maybe play less cards that start off your combo by searching. And this means, in the current format, for example, I'm debating in Mitsurugi engines kind of cutting down on pre-preparation rights, because while the card is phenomenal from a value perspective, as Droll encroaches ever more so on this format, I want less cards that lose to Droll and Lockbird, and the Mitsurugi cards are a clear example of that. Maybe my losses are due to bricking, not enough non-engine, right? You see these things and you find ways to compensate. Not, of course, simple as just add more engine or add more non-engine, but sometimes it is. And you go through all these different things and options in your head to try and find a different way of solving the problem. Obviously, each solution you kind of put forward doesn't guarantee that it'll work, but that's where the testing process is important. You keep testing and you keep figuring out new problems, what works, and if your ideas actually solve the problems you set out to solve. You could argue that Mystic Mine had no good answer to it. I really don't think there were no good answers to Mystic Mine. There were, in fact, I think several, which is why I found it very frustrating that people would complain constantly, even the top players, about Mystic Mine and say how much they lost to it, when they were being negligent in the way they built their decks, because there are many different ways to handle it. Even the song that Scarlet made kind of complains about having to just draw the out, and there's another song about just drawing the out, and that's not really how it works. Just drawing the out is not actually solving the problem. There were actual ways to solve the problem, and it's not like other players like myself didn't share their ideas online. In fact, I have a deck list here from my Brazil deck that showed my thought process and the things that I did to beat Mystic Mine. Taking a look at this deck list, let's see what I had, for example. So in my deck, there's actually 2 outs to Mystic Mine, and importantly, they're both searchable, which means while I can draw them, it's not a necessity. If my opponent sets up Mystic Mine when they go first, yes, it's going to be way harder for me to beat it, but that's not a problem that was very omnipresent in the format. People conflate Mystic Mine as a tech card and Mystic Mine as a deck. They don't accomplish the same thing, and if you complain about both as if they're the same thing, you're kind of losing sight of how Yu-Gi-Oh works, because those are 2 entirely separate problems to tackle. This deck is not designed to beat a pure Mystic Mine deck. While I can every time I go first, for sure, going second, it will be a little more fluky, but that wasn't a big player in the metagame, and if it became a big player, it'd be very easy for me to adapt it. But regardless, the 2 things here you'll notice are Sprite Smashers and Eradicator Epidemic Virus. Mystic Mine was in a lot of people's decks, side decks, main decks, in Sprite, in Danger, Tier, not Danger. I guess it was Danger, but still, other random stuff. Exorcister, just a week later, my teammate Ray Dye beat me with, had Mystic Mine as Exorcister deck. It was in a lot of places. Mystic Mine was not to be overlooked. If that's going to be there, you have to be prepared for it. So yeah, Sprite Smashers and Eradicator. Now, how do I search these cards? Remember, I had very well thought out plans going into the tournament. If I go first, I knew I needed a way to stop my opponent from just slamming down Mystic Mine and winning. And one option was Gigantic Sprite, special summon from the deck a Sprite Jet, and search a Sprite Smashers. Okay, what if I couldn't do that, or if I milled the Sprite Smashers? Do I have any other outs? Well, there is another one. It is a little more investment dependent. It requires more resources to make, and that was Eradicator, because if you milled it or you could Curious for it, you could Griffin to reset a spell trap. You could reset Smashers, depending if you could set it up properly. If not, you can reset the Eradicator. And then Eradicator alongside any high attack monster, like the Gigantic Sprite, like the Kaleido Hearts, like the Dragostapelia, like Bigfoot. Contribute any of those, call spells, and bam. Or you could wait and you can hold it until your opponent uses Mystic Mine, let them pass, and then eradicate them there. And that was where Mystic Mine, I felt, was low-key like not even that good of a card, because if people just played around it properly, it was really not that good. It was way too easy to prepare for answers to it, and you're a lot of the time gambling your opponent just not having the, I guess, respect for it. You're hoping on people just being negligent, and for a lot of people that worked and it got there. I just never wanted to put my fate in a tournament into that hope, which is why you'll see a lot of my deck lists in this period actually don't play Mystic Mine either. It just respects it. The other thing with Mystic Mine there is it's not a game-ending card on the spot or a lingering floodgate. It's a card that sits on the field, which means that if you answer it at a later point, or if you're able to answer it at a later point, you can immediately still turn the game around. This matters for two reasons. For one, it means the opponent activates Mystic Mine on you and you have a way to beat it. You could just wait, because if your opponent starts playing into the field, they may suffer because of their own Mystic Mine. And then during the end phase, if you can kill the Mystic Mine, they've now left themselves utterly defenseless, and instead of the Mystic Mine buying them time, it's entirely sealed their fate. It was a gamble, which backfires. But then there's the alternative, and that is because it's a card that sits on field, you also have the chance to constantly draw into ways to beat Mystic Mine, or you can set up follow-up ways to beat Mystic Mine. So, for example, other decks like the Adventure deck could add Draco back to the equip spell, and then next turn just activate Draco back, and that was it. Mystic Mine's gone. That's just one way to do it, and there were many different ways of doing something similar. You could either clear your own fields, or do a multi-turn setup that gives your opponent cards that'll kill it in their end phase. It's these things that were all very, I guess, nuanced, that made Mystic Mine at least somewhat engaging to play against. I don't want to make it out like I'm a defender of Mystic Mine, because why I dislike Mystic Mine and I still wanted to see it banned is because it created a lot of games that were very boring. Some games could be interesting, but a lot of games were not. They were just draw, pass, and there are future matches like this. They're bad. It's not fun, and that could be the state of many different duels thanks to Mystic Mine, as well as it did warp deck building in a very meaningful way, because if you're going to be respectful of Mystic Mine, you have to play cards to beat it, and you have to play in a way that respects it, and that may be considered a good thing or a bad thing for a format, cough cough, like Maxi. It's an undeniable fact that it did shape Yu-Gi-Oh around it. And if we're trying to avoid these kind of omnipresent forces, then Mystic Mine did not have a real place here. Kind of circling back, I feel like Mystic Mine on a power level, or at least in the format perspective, wasn't making the game unskillful, which is what a lot of the cards I complain about do. I think it almost had a worse reputation than it sort of deserved. My original tweet here is not meant to tell people that they suck. You guys aren't planning properly. There are ways to beat it. And maybe I could have followed up with another essay explaining the thought process. But my deck lists were out there and available for players to see my plan, because I had one, and other players did too. In modern contexts, not much has changed. And while we can still complain about these things, it's still relevant. And in regards to Mjolnir, while you could argue Mjolnir's health of the metagame, or health for the metagame, is negative, I will gladly take that perspective as well, it's not without setup. Mjolnir is not a card like D-Shifter or Barrier that can be activated for effectively zero setup or cost. The Mjolnir setup requires bodies and moving pieces that are vulnerable. My decision to not play hand traps is directly a key factor in why Mjolnir resolved against me and why it's even viable. There are many hand traps you could play that stop Mjolnir. You could Bell, you could Bestial, you can Impulse. Impulse stops it completely because you also can't even use light monsters when they give it to you. You can hand trap earlier pieces of the deck. You could Charmy them to slow them down and draw on other hand traps. You can appear with the Quinkery. While any one of these may not work because their combo has extenders, or depending on the quality of their hand, it still shows that there are ways to tackle this. You just have to look for them. And if you're choosing to outright ignore an important piece of the metagame, yeah, it will punish you. Of course, there are going to be compromises and you can't solve every problem. Not too long ago, I complained about Shifter. I lost to it twice in the span of 5 minutes at Weiss Anaheim. And people spammed the tweet at me. The most famous one that I received is with Shifter. How am I not prepared for Shifter at this point, with all due respect? But this is where concessions are made. So yes, I know Shifter exists. However, in this format, it is not a popular card. It's not playable in most of the main decks, with only Vanquish Soul being able to play it. A deck which, representation-wise, isn't that popular. Preparing a lot for it's not that meaningful. Furthermore, Shifter is not searchable, and it's a one-of. It happening several times in a tournament is not likely. In fact, it's also very possible it happens 0 times in many tournaments. I made the conscious decision to not plan for it. And you could argue that's wrong, but me preparing for it would have made compromises in other regards. So my cathartic tweet of, damn, this happened to me, is partially, damn, what are the odds it happens twice in one match, because that's what happened. But also frustration because it's one of the things you can't reasonably prepare for. Where you could reasonably prepare for Mystic Mine, and even to some degree Mjolnir, cards like Shifter, it's not really reasonable to do that. Even cards like Barrier and Droll, which I hate, the ability to prepare for them is not as simple as something like Mystic Mine, and its efficacy in combating it is going to be diminished because you can build to beat Barrier or Droll, and it'll work sometimes, but to beat it as frequently and as predictably as you could with something like Mystic Mine, it's not really possible. So for example, that means in your Mitsu Yummy decks, cutting down on search cards, or switching to a more pure version of Yummy, or if you want to play a Barrier, going the reverse way and playing more diverse engines or more link-based stuff to make sure you can push through these cards. My way in Dracotel beating Barrier is more draw cards to slow down my opponents, so Charmies and Phantasmes, as well as get 5 mana to resolve in their turn, as well as Super Poly, so I can chain, giving more cards to survive and push through the D barrier, and then get me into the game for the long term. These things aren't guaranteed. Where Mystic Mine was actually healthy for the game is because it's primarily going second card and it stays in the field, meant it was incredibly easy to actually prepare for. If you just planned out ahead of the tournament, you could almost 100% of the time deal with it. And that's why it was so baffling to me that people weren't prepared for it. More so than almost any other problem card in the game, Mystic Mine, even though it was a problem, was solvable. And that's what I was trying to communicate. So I don't mind you guys, by the way, giving me this copy pasta back in my face. I'm all for the joke. I just want to make it clear that this was coming from a place of genuine teaching and to improve the community. I just hope that anybody who did respond to stuff like this meant so in the lighthearted comedic fashion, because I welcome it. No problem making fun of myself. I welcome you guys to do it. Just the people who say it in a actual whining and mad fashion, I want to make sure that they see this and have direction for the future. But before I leave you guys, I want to end it off with a quote from a US president, from good old Teddy Roosevelt. Complaining about a problem without posing a solution is called whining. And let's not do that. So hopefully you guys are all better prepared for the next YCS, regional, or whatever. And I can see you guys all there. Good luck.